Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Abraxas, a name whispered through the corridors of time, echoing from ancient Alexandria to the fevered dreams of modern mystics. Neither god nor demon, yet simultaneously both. Abraxas emerges as the polymorphous world spirit permeating the very fabric of existence. To speak of Abraxas is to invoke that which cannot be contained by language, the ineffable force uniting all contradictions. The mind recoils at first contact, for Abraxas resides beyond the dualistic cage of human perception, demanding we abandon our comfortable polarities. To see Abraxas is to step beyond the limits of conventional understanding, requiring one to embrace the totality of existence without flinching from its terrible beauty and beautiful terror. In the spiritual cartography of the ancients, Abraxas stands as the ruler of the first heaven, presiding over the eternal cycles of birth, death, and resurrection. The Gnostic teacher Basilides, whose wisdom bloomed in the fertile intellectual soil of Alexandria, named this entity the Great Archon, the princeps governing the 365 spheres of existence. In this cosmology, Abraxas represents not a deity bound by the whims of men, nor subject to the crude morality of lesser gods, but rather the primordial pattern from which all patterns emerge. Historical whispers of this force appear throughout the mystical traditions. The holy book of the Great Invisible Spirit speaks its name in reverent tones. The Greek magical papyri invoke its power. Ancient hands carved its likeness into Abraxas stones, carried as talismans against the chaos of an uncertain world. Even the Knights Templar, those enigmatic warrior monks, emblazoned their seals with symbols of this cosmic principle. Carl Jung, who delved into the depths of the collective unconscious, wrote in his 7 Sermons to the Dead, Abraxas is the god whom it is difficult to know. His power is the very greatest, because man does not perceive it at all. To approach Abraxas is to approach the borderlands of sanity, where certainties dissolve and paradox reigns supreme. It is to stand at the threshold between known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, self and other, and to recognize that the boundary itself is illusory, a convenient fiction we maintain to shield ourselves from the overwhelming truth of our existence. In an age fractured by false dichotomies and artificial divisions, the ancient wisdom of Abraxas beckons us toward wholeness, not by denying the reality of opposites, but by embracing the greater reality that contains and transcends them. Like the serpent that devours its own tail, Abraxas reminds us that all endings are beginnings, all destruction is creation, all separation is ultimately illusion. The formless takes form, the ineffable assumes shape. Such is the paradox of Abraxas in material representation. Across the sands of time, this cosmic principle has manifested in iconography both terrifying and sublime, a visual koan challenging the mind to transcend its own limitations. Behold the classical representation, a creature resembling a man with the body of a human being, crowned with the head of a rooster, standing upon legs formed of writhing serpents. This chimerical amalgamation speaks not of monstrosity, but of transcendent unity, the marriage of earth and sky, material and spiritual, bound together in a singular being that defies categorization. Each element of this composite form resonates with symbolic potency. The scholar J.J. Bellarmine connected these body parts to divine emanations. The human torso representing the supreme being, the foundation of existence, the serpentine legs embodying nous and logos, the principle of divine intelligence moving through creation, the rooster head symbolizing phronesis, cosmic wisdom that penetrates the darkness of ignorance, the rooster, herald of dawn, announcer of solar resurrection, stands as the power to awaken. Its cry breaks the spell of night, calling forth consciousness from the void of sleep. In Abraxas, this awakening force is perpetual, an eternal alarm, summoning humanity from its spiritual slumber. The rooster's position atop the human form suggests the primacy of awakened consciousness, the illuminated mind that transcends mere bodily existence. The rooster's symbolism connects further to the inherent duality of being, as it straddles the thresholds of day and night, calling forth the light while still embraced by darkness. It is the perfect embodiment of transition, neither fully of the night nor completely of the day, but the living bridge between these states. Below, the serpent legs carry profound significance across cultural boundaries. Ancient symbol of transformation and eternity, the serpent coils through the ages as the cycle of death and rebirth. It sheds its skin to emerge renewed, embodying the principle of perpetual becoming. The serpent moves in sinuous waves, mirroring the undulations of cosmic energy as it flows through manifestation. In many traditions, the serpent represents Kundalini, the dormant spiritual energy coiled at the base of the spine, awaiting awakening. In one hand, Abraxas holds a shield, symbol of divine protection, the boundary between worlds, the principle of discrimination that allows consciousness to take shape against the formless void. In the other hand, the entity wields a whip, the driving force that propels existence forward, the principle of movement and change that prevents stagnation. Protection and propulsion, stability and movement, another duality unified in the singular being. These symbols speak a language older than words, communicating directly to the depths of the psyche. They bypass rational thought to awaken intuitive understanding. The image of Abraxas serves not merely as representation but as activation, a visual catalyst triggering recognition of these same principles within the viewer. To contemplate this imagery is to engage in active imagination, to allow the boundaries between observer and observed to dissolve. The serpent legs begin to move within one's own energetic body. The rooster's alertness awakens in one's own consciousness. The human torso becomes one's own embodied existence. The shield protects not some distant deity, but one's own psychic integrity. The whip drives not some external force, but one's own evolutionary journey. Thus, Abraxas emerges not as an entity separate from humanity, but as the symbolic representation of our own wholeness. The integrated self that contains and transcends all oppositions, all fragmentations, all the scattered pieces of our divided consciousness. Across traditions, Abraxas shapeshifts and transforms, yet retains its essential nature as the unifier of opposites, the transcender of boundaries, the reconciler of contradictions. In this system articulated by Irenaeus, the early Christian theologian and heresiologist, Abraxas emerges as the ruler of the 365 heavens. This numerical correspondence is no mere coincidence. it contains profound cosmological significance. The 365 days of the solar year, the full cycle of earthly time, fall under the dominion of this entity who contains within himself the totality of temporal experience. The numerical equivalent of the name itself, calculated through Greek and Phoenician gematria, equals 365, a mathematical confirmation of Abraxas' connection to the cosmic cycles and celestial movements. This numerical symbolism extends into Basilidean Gnostic cosmology, where Abraxas presides over 365 spheres or heavens, as mentioned earlier, each representing a layer of reality, a step on the ladder between material existence and transcendent spirit. Each sphere embodies a particular quality or principle, and Abraxas encompasses them all, standing simultaneously at the pinnacle and at the foundation of this metaphysical architecture. Epiphanius, the 4th century bishop of Salamis, takes this understanding further, designating Abraxas as the power above all and first principle, the causeless cause, the unmoved mover. In this interpretation, Abraxas becomes the cause and first archetype of all things, the primordial pattern from which all subsequent patterns derive. Not merely a ruler among rulers, but the originating source of rulership itself. Not just another power, but the wellspring from which all power flows. In the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, a Gnostic text discovered among the Nag Hammadi library, Abraxas appears in yet another guise, an eon dwelling with Sophia. Here the entity takes its place within the complex Gnostic mythology of emanations, associated with the luminary Alelith at the outer border of the pleroma. In this context, Abraxas serves as intercessor between the absolute transcendence of the true God and the limited realm of the demiurge. The Gnostics recognized Abraxas as a being that transcends all boundaries. Their intuitive understanding penetrated beyond simplistic categorizations of good and evil, light and dark. They apprehended a cosmic principle containing within itself the essence of every polarity, a creator and destroyer in one, a being of infinite compassion and terrible justice, the source of both salvation and tribulation. As shown in the text in the opening of the video, Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible? Here lies the profound challenge that Abraxas presents to conventional religious thinking, the refusal to be categorized, to be neatly sorted into the comforting boxes of deity or demon, savior or destroyer. Abraxas is not either or, but both and more besides. This refusal of categorization extends to our contemporary understanding as well. Abraxas cannot be claimed exclusively by any tradition, neither Gnostic nor Hermetic, neither ancient nor modern, neither Western nor Eastern. The entity slips through the fingers of those who would grasp it too tightly, who would claim exclusive ownership of its mysteries. Like quicksilver, Abraxas flows between definitions, between traditions, between epochs, eternally present yet never fully captured, eternally known yet never fully comprehended. To encounter Abraxas causes one to undergo a profound psychological transformation, a shattering and reconstitution of the self. Carl Jung's experience illustrates the overwhelming nature of such an encounter. Before writing 7 Sermons to the Dead, Jung described a paranormal experience with spirits filling his house, a psychic eruption from the depths of the collective unconscious. The boundaries between inner and outer reality dissolved. the veil between the personal psyche and the transpersonal realm grew thin. In this liminal state, Jung received the transmission that would become the sermons, attributed not to himself but to Basilides of Alexandria, as if the ancient Gnostic teacher had used Jung as a vessel for communication across the centuries. This psychic event wasn't merely unusual, it was transformative. Jung, delving into the depths of his own subconscious, saw Abraxas as the ultimate reality beyond even the gods of old. He recognized Abraxas as the terrible truth that the world is not ruled by love alone, nor by hatred alone, but by something beyond both. The psychological impact was profound. Jung confronted the force that moves the world, not bound by human laws, unshackled from what he considered the naive distinctions of good and evil. For Jung, Abraxas represented not merely a historical or mythological figure, but a living psychological reality, an archetypal force operating in the depths of the collective unconscious. His encounter emerged during what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of profound psychological crisis following his break with Freud. In his private journal, The Red Book, which remained unpublished until 2009, Jung documented his inner journeys through active imagination, a process of engaged dialogue with the figures and forces of his unconscious. Through this process, Abraxas emerged as a central symbol of psychic totality, representing the integration of conscious and unconscious, the reconciliation of the shadow with the persona, the union of anima and animus. Jung understood Abraxas as terrible, not in the modern sense of horrifying, but in its original sense of inspiring awe, overwhelming in its magnitude and significance. In 7 Sermons to the Dead, he writes, "Abraxas is effect. Nothing stands opposed to it but the ineffective. Hence its effective nature freely unfolds itself." This ineffectiveness, the inability to affect or be affected, is for Jung the only true opposite to Abraxas, which embodies the principle of effectivity itself. Jung's descriptions of Abraxas reveal the overwhelming psychological complexity of this encounter. A 1,000-armed polyp, coiled knot of winged serpents, the hermaphrodite of the earliest beginning. These visceral, almost hallucinatory images convey the psychological experience of confronting a reality that transcends rational categories. The mind, faced with what cannot be contained by its existing structures, generates these composite symbols in a desperate attempt to represent that which defies representation. The encompassing of opposites, love and love's murder, the saint and his betrayer, forces the psyche to expand beyond its comfortable polarizations. The ego, which maintains itself through the creation of boundaries and distinctions, faces disillusion when confronted with that which transcends all boundaries. Jung called Abraxas the effective itself, not any particular effect, but effect in general, a principle that stands above the sun god and above the devil. When faced with such transcendent unity, the small self trembles on the edge of annihilation. The psychological implications are profound. Jung saw Abraxas as representing the fundamental creative, destructive energy of the psyche, the primal force which simultaneously builds psychological structures and dissolves them, allowing for genuine transformation and development. Without this principle, psychological growth becomes impossible, trapped either in rigid crystallization or formless chaos. Jung's articulation of the individuation process, which is what he called the lifelong journey towards psychological wholeness, relied heavily on the integrative principle embodied by Abraxas. To individuate is not to perfect oneself, or to achieve some ideal state, but to become more fully what one already is, embracing both light and shadow, both creation and destruction, both being and becoming. Abraxas stands as the patron deity of this process, embodying its paradoxical nature. Jung's astrological hypothesis frames this psychological transformation in cosmic terms. He suggested that the age of Pisces represented a split between Christ and Antichrist, with the two fish of the Pisces symbol embodying this fundamental division in the collective psyche. This conflict, he implied, would find resolution in the coming age of Aquarius, a new eon in which the shattered fragments of consciousness would be reunited, the divided self made whole again through the reconciling principle embodied by Abraxas. Perhaps most significantly, Jung's conception of the self bears the unmistakable imprint of Abraxas. The self is not merely the good aspects of personality, but the totality of psychic possibility, encompassing the destructive and chaotic alongside the creative and ordered. Like Abraxas, the self transcends moral categories while providing the container within which morality becomes meaningful. As the spirit of transition, Abraxas stands at the threshold between psychological states. The hybrid nature of Abraxas, part human, part animal, part divine, represents the transitional space between categories, the liminal zone where transformation becomes possible. Positioned at the boundary between the old cycle and the new, Abraxas guides the individual psyche through its death and rebirth. Yet this guidance comes not through gentle reassurance, but through major destabilization. Abraxas functions as the revealer of illusions, stripping away the comfortable fictions we construct to ease the burden of existence. The old gods and their dualistic morality created a sense of order and meaning. Abraxas shatters this order to reveal a deeper, more terrifying truth. As Jung wrote, Abraxas is not a god of comfort. He rips away the masks of false divinities. The psychological impact is that of simultaneous devastation and liberation. The painful recognition that every act of creation births its own destruction, that every rise must have a fall, that all psychological certainties contain the seeds of their own undoing. For Jung, Abraxas ultimately represented the highest spiritual aspiration, not escape from the world and its contradictions, but complete immersion in them, not transcendence of duality, but its full embodiment and eventual integration. In this understanding, spirituality is not about becoming pure or perfect, but about becoming whole, embracing the fullness of human experience in all its beauty and terror, all its creation and destruction, all its order and chaos. To integrate this knowledge is to achieve a higher level of psychological maturity, one that embraces the paradox rather than fleeing from it, that finds strength in uncertainty rather than false security, that recognizes wholeness not as absence of conflict, but as the transcendence of artificial division. As we approach the innermost mystery, we confront the most paradoxical truth of all. Abraxas does not demand worship, nor does he seek followers. Unlike the lesser gods who crave adoration and sacrifice, who bargain and threaten and cajole, Abraxas exists beyond the economy of spiritual transaction. There is no temple to Abraxas, because every moment of existence is already his temple. There is no special prayer to Abraxas, because every thought, word, and deed already takes place within his being. Abraxas speaks in the chaos of a storm, in the quiet whisper of a dying fire. His voice is heard not through ears, but through the totality of being. To hear this voice is not to receive information, but to awaken to what has always been present, to recognize what has always been known. Ultimately, Abraxas is understood not as a being to be worshipped, nor as a force to be feared, but as the nameless, formless essence that moves through all things. Abraxas is the silence between thoughts, the chaos within order, the void within fullness. To know Abraxas is to know oneself as simultaneously infinitesimal and infinite, momentary and eternal, distinct and unified. This knowledge cannot be possessed, it can only be lived. It cannot be taught, it can only be recognized. The 20th century psychologist Erich Neumann, a student of Jung who deeply understood these principles, wrote, "The encounter with the self is the encounter with one's own life meaning, the coming to consciousness of a psychic totality which, as an archetype, carries with it the symbol of wholeness. This wholeness, terrifying in its completeness, overwhelming in its implications, is what Abraxas represents. To approach this knowledge is to walk a razor's edge between illumination and delusion. There is no guarantee of a safe passage. The dangerous knowledge of Abraxas demands everything and promises nothing. Yet in this very demand lies the possibility of authentic liberation, the freedom that comes from embracing the totality of existence without illusion or evasion." Thank you again so much for joining me on this exploration of the complex figure of Abraxas. Let me know in the comments what you think. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video. Check out my website, oculus.com, and check out the other channel I'm involved in called Folks of Yore, where we look at interesting stories from history, but from a more human perspective. We just released a video on the daily life of a medieval alchemist, and it's great, so check it out. Until next time.